Welcome to Marvellous Women, the podcast. I'm Samantha Rush. I'm the creator of Marvellous Women cards, and I'm the host of the podcast. In this episode, we are going to be joined by Heidi Mayhew-Sanders. And in this episode, Heidi shares with us her journey from rural New South Wales on a farm through to a jet-setting international career. And she also talks to us about her love for learning and growing. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to Marvellous Women, the podcast. On this episode, we have the fantastic Heidi Mayhew-Sanders, who is joining us. And Heidi, I don't know very well yet, but I already know she's fantastic because of our pre-chat, and I'm looking forward to getting to know her better. Heidi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Samantha. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
And I'm very happy to have you here as well, because meeting new people and learning about other people is absolutely one of my hobbies. It's got to be right up there with eating cheese, drinking champagne, meeting new people and chatting with new people. So thank you. Heidi, let's kick off with my favorite question, which is, who are you?
Okay. Well, so I am firstly a mother of two beautiful children who are now pretty much grown up. They're in their mid-20s. So that's my number one thing, who I am. I'm also, a country girl. I'm an Australian country girl. I came off the land. And then when I finished school, I moved to Sydney, not a lot of opportunity in the country for women, where I studied and worked for a while before, in the early 90s, I decided I wanted more. I wanted to go and see more of the world. So I packed up and went traveling overseas. First of all, I went to America and drove around America, then Canada, and then across to the UK, which is where I pretty much got stuck. I was in the UK for 17 years, but it was a great opportunity because I that's where I really started to jump into my profession and my career as well. And I had the opportunity to work in, UK, Europe, US, Russia. So I had some great opportunities. My role was HR, so I'm a qualified HR professional, mainly working in financial services, private equity and asset management, emerging markets, that sort of space when I was abroad. And then in 2009, I decided my daughter was about to go into high school, and I decided, and they wanted to as well, come back and, have some life in Australia, having an Australian mum. So we packed up and I came back to Brisbane, even though Brisbane was not my original landing. I joined a professional services firm in Brisbane as their HR director. And then I guess in the last a little over 12 months, I decided that I really wanted to do what I always wanted to do. And 2015 put my business case together to do it. So it took me a while to get the courage to do it. And that was set up my own career development company and also proactive HR consulting company, which is what I do now, and provide my services mainly to SMEs and corporates and individuals around that, individual sort of career development support.
Yeah, which I think is such an important thing in this day and age where, in terms of, loyalty and how long do I work for a company and how do I try and get diverse experience? Because I think organizational expectations when they take someone on are changing,
Yeah.
and also I think, and you'll know more about this, Heidi, but I think that the cycle of, whether it's a employees market or an employers market, it kind of feels like that's getting faster and is a little bit more dynamic. That's how it feels, but you will know more about that than me.
No, 100%. I mean, the whole workforce dynamics has changed so much, and that in particular, that loyalty piece, the younger generation or the generation coming through the workforce now, they're really looking for opportunity more quickly. They're not afraid to move. They're not afraid to take risks. So for companies trying to retain staff It's actually very challenging. And I first really started to notice it pre-COVID, just sort of COVID hit, and then we had a lot of different changes in how we do work, like people could work more flexibly and things like that. So I guess out of that, I think the generations that are in the workforce now were saying, well, actually, I like this different way of working, and I will work with companies that offer me what I would like, so that's created a whole new challenge for businesses in making sure that they are offering, different benefits and an opportunity that's going to retain their staff.
It kind of feels like there's an even greater shift towards that focus on individuality and individual outcomes and what I want versus what might be the greater good for the organization or for society. What are your thoughts on that?
100%. Absolutely. And, and that's been very difficult. And, I think one of the challenges, which is a good and a bad challenge, it could be one or the other, is the mixed generations within the workforce, because there's a real mix of how people were brought up and what work means to them and what, loyalty means to them, etc. And, I even noticed, and I use benefits as an example, that, initially when I used to roll out benefits, it was like a blanket, and you sort of, everyone fitted in and everyone's happy with what was given. Whereas now you really have to think about the individual, and allow individuals to have a selection within an organization to be able to actually retain them, because, it's all about playing to people's individualities, but also, it is very challenging for business. Yeah. Because, you do need structure, and you do need consistency, and you do need fairness, and on all these sorts of things. Which,
and then there's just administering it as well,
it's costs more money. It's more challenging. People are spending more time. Professional people are spending more time on administration when they really shouldn't be, purely because we do need to provide so many different, options. And certainly in my last job, when I joined, I shared one resource with the marketing director, and by the time I left, I had 8 people in my team.
Wow.
And that sort of indicates, how human resource management and managing people within the workforce has really changed over the past decade.
Which leads me to my next question. I've got like 10 questions I want to ask you, but one of these, we're on topic. So you kind of talked about, you started seeing this shift before COVID. So we're talking about six or so years. If we jump forward sort of 6 to 10 years, what's your prediction on how will workforce and workplaces be changing when it comes to what we've been talking about, in terms of benefits and, retention and even recruitment? How do you think that's going to change?
Oh, look, the only answer I have for that is there's going to be constant change. Do you know what I mean? That's one thing for sure. How, I don't know. I mean, obviously, the things that have really influenced the change, I think, is the way we do work. So that is, being able to do work more flexibly, technology, the technology piece that is coming in and changing the way we do work and the way, our roles look even, that's going to continue. And, in terms of basically just benefits, you just have to be more and more agile. I don't think, someone said to me the other day, I've got a 5 to 10 year plan. And I thought, how do you have 5 to 10 year plan these days? But, I think companies need to be very agile and, yes, have their plan of maybe 3 years, but, continuously be on top of assessing what that plan looks like and measuring where things are, how things are going. Measurement's really important around how people are feeling, really drilling down on return on investment on certain initiatives. I've always been an HR person that has really wanted to implement things that matter, you know,
Mm.
just because it's a buzzword in, you know, society at the
Yeah.
time, does not mean that it's appropriate for you or your company, or it's going to give you a return on investment.
Mm.
And so companies, I think, that take the attitude that, you know, if we can do two things really, really well
Yeah.
each year and make change with two things that stick in this very, you know, fast environment that we live in, then I think, you know, that's the way to be thinking.
Which is difficult because I think as humans, we want to keep adding more and more and more. And no, we can do it. And we always overestimate what we can do. Now we can do these 10 things. We can do these
I
15
know.
things. Absolutely. And then when you get to the end of the period, you're like, well, you've done one. So
Mm.
what do you want to do next time? And then again, we get into this cycle of, no, we can totally do it this year. Last year we had all of these things. It's not going to happen this year. Is that
Yeah.
also your experience?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, sometimes, and I think, you know, we are in danger of trying to do too much.
Totally.
And when we try
Even
to do too,
individually, right? For
ab-
ourselves personally.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And you know, that sense of failure if you don't actually
Mm.
meet, you know, what's on your list. And it's really interesting. A very long time ago, a person, you know, said to me at work, Heidi, stop writing your list. You know, the more you put on the list, you keep going through and going through, but every day you get disappointed if you don't knock off. If,
Yeah.
you know, knock off your whole list. If you knock off, prioritize your list and make sure you're happy in yourself that during that day you've knocked off the top three things or the top two things, and that's okay. And you know, we've seen a lot of burnout over the years, and certainly anxiety and mental health and things like that in the workforce is getting much more, you know, prominent. And I think, you know, that's because we beat ourselves up, and we all have expectations of ourselves, and you know, yeah. So I'm hoping in the future, in a way, that the workforce does take a bit of a rain check and almost starts embracing some old, you know, core ways of doing things.
Yeah.
And interesting, it's been a passion of mine over the years, well, over the last few years, really, because this is such an interesting space, is to look at reading. I go back and I'll read a leadership book, you know, which was written in the late 80s or
Mm.
in the early 90s or something, and then I'll compare it to, you know, what's coming out now.
Yeah,
Now there
interesting.
are differences, but there's also fundamental, you know, normality across, you know, these things. And I think sometimes we sort of spin out of control thinking that we have to come up with new and wonderful things the whole time.
Yeah, I think that's really, I mean, everything old is new again, right? You only have to look around at fashion
Yeah.
or you know, the mullets are coming back or, you know, people are out wearing, you know, Crocs again. So
Yeah.
I think everything always comes back,
Mm.
which I think can be both good and bad. You know, I think back to, I used to love listening to my boss who was working in the sort of the late 70s, early 80s, talking about he'd have his desk and then the you know, the mail would come in and he'd get out the carbon paper and he'd do this and then he'd put the thing to go out in the mail on that side. There's no computer on your desk. There's
No.
nothing that makes you there's nothing that makes you feel like you need to be working faster.
No,
So
not at
how do we
all.
slow down?
Oh, gee. That's a question I'm not sure I can answer. And
No.
it is a question, though, or it does pop into my head often. You
Yeah.
know, I do say, wow, you know, can we get any faster? You know,
Yes is
how are
always
we
the
going
answer. But
exactly
there's something's got to give, right? So, the
100%.
classic, you've got time, cost and quality. So
Mm,
if one changes, then the others are going to change. So for you to
mm,
get faster, what are you going to be sacrificing?
mm, totally, totally. Yeah, it's a very good question,
Mm.
for sure. And I think, you
It
know,
sounds like we need a glass of wine to work that out at some point in the future, Heidi.
I definitely think so, Samantha. That's for sure.
I'm
Mm,
curious to hear about whether there are any, you mentioned that you're a country girl. I'm
mm.
guessing country New South Wales.
Yes.
Whether there's any kind of lessons or things that you learn from the country that maybe might help to answer that question. So how do we try and get everything done that we need to get done, but maybe let's not be so furious about it, because sometimes good things take time.
Mm.
I know that that's a totally off script question that you might be
No, but it's an interesting one. And I think, I think one of the things is to be okay with it's okay that you're not always doing something, if you know what I mean. So, I mean,
Absolutely.
in the country, I was brought up, go mustering with my, on my horse with my father and my brothers, and I used to ride behind these sheep and bring them in, and you had a task and you knew what the job was, and we worked really hard. We'd get up early in the morning and we'd take them all to the sheds and shed them, and all those sorts of things, and then you would finish for the day and then you would relax. Whereas I think in this
What's
day and
that?
age,
What's that, Heidi?
I know, because of the technology and expectation, it's really interesting with this right to disconnect that's come in and things like that. It's very, very hard to do that. And I guess, country life was also, you knew what you had to do, and it wasn't always easy, but you also knew when you stopped. You knew when your work stopped, and your relaxing time and family time and leisure time came in. And I think, even though it's interesting because we say we all like work-life balance, but sometimes I do question whether we have more or less of it these days.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And you mentioned before about knowing when to stop and expectations. And I think a lot of the time they're actually our expectations.
Yeah.
They're things that no one has ever said or even, insinuated that, we need to be answering an email at 10 p.m.
No.
or whatever it might be. And look, I know that there are exceptions out there, absolutely.
Mm.
But we make it up.
Yeah, we totally do. We totally do. And I think, that is where it's really important that, people do have some learning and development and training around, managing oneself before anyone else.
Yeah.
Because often I think the problems come from people that can't manage themselves, and then that can trickle down into leadership problems. And being okay with it, learning to manage up as well is very important. To be able to put perspective around, what your expectation is and what others are, and where it actually meets.
We talked before about, your to-do list and someone kind of, giving you some advice on, maybe you can do these things differently. And we've just been talking about how do we find a way to slow down or yes, work hard, but know when to stop. So for anyone who's listening to this podcast that these messages absolutely resonate with them with, yes, I don't know when to stop. Yes, I feel like I have to do this. Yes, I just keep adding to my to-do list, and look, guilty. So this is maybe asking for a friend, what words of advice would you have, maybe tapping into that, that country perspective and that older fashioned perspective that maybe we've totally forgotten about that needs to come back. So Heidi, I confess, I have a habit of asking really long questions. So I will
Yeah.
try and make it shorter. But what words of advice or wisdom would you have for anyone like me who, I have those expectations. I don't always know when to stop, and I always have a big to-do list.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is to feel okay that it's okay not to get everything done on your list, right? And that the other thing is, and country people are very like this. They focus on them much more. They're comfortable in their own skin. Do you know what I mean? So what Farmer Jones is doing across the road doesn't necessarily impact Farmer Bob on the other side of the road, because they're very much focused on their tasks and what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah,
And the
so
life
my
they're
property is
living.
very different to your property. So why would
It's
I be looking at your property and what you're doing?
Exactly. So I think, and I think this is one of the things, if we focus more on, and it doesn't, it sounds a bit selfish, but it's not really. It's if we focus on ourselves and what we really need to do and really need to get done. And, we're all grown-ups. So,
Most
if
of
you
us.
have, yes, if you have a list, of things, then you should be able to prioritize it. And if you can't, then you need to seek help and learn how to do that. Because I see, and this is one of the biggest things I see with burnout in leaders, is they do not know how to prioritize or delegate. And there's this feeling of delegation. If I delegate, like, am I am I doing myself a disfavor because somebody else might be able to do what I can do, or that sort of silly thinking, rather than thinking, wow, many hands make light work, which is what farmers think. At the end of the day, you're often, usually, if you're, as I said, when we went mustering, it wasn't just my dad, it was my dad and my brothers. And we would go mustering on the horses and bring the sheep in, and then all have our little piece so that we could then get home and, enjoy our meal and enjoy our quiet time at home, or our sport, or whatever it was that we did.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think
So
thinking of work as a means to live a good life, we've kind of forgotten that.
totally,
Mm.
totally. Absolutely. I very much family, and outside work is the priority. You run your farm because, yes, you love your farm and
Yeah.
and everything else, but at the end of the day, ultimately, it is to provide for your family. And I said to you at the very beginning, for me, the most important thing for me was being a mother of two children,
Mm.
because it gave me perspective in terms of all the noise and things that goes on outside, that you then
Yes.
have people you're responsible for, and you want to
Mm.
give them the best opportunities, so that becomes your focus. And so whilst I loved my career, a lot of it was, yes, how can I earn the most money I can to
Yeah.
provide to my children, or how can I have a working arrangement that's going to help me support my children and things like that. And I think probably that's what we've lost.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. That kind of the reason.
Yes. Yeah.
There's a couple of from what I can see from the half an hour that I've known you, Heidi, a couple of really big choices that I can see that you've made. And I'd love for you to maybe take us under the hood a little bit
Mm. Yeah.
on kind of how you did that. And the first one is for you to leave your home, the country, and move to the big city,
Mm.
Sydney. So
Mm.
I can imagine that would have been a big choice. And the other one is for you to leave the comfort of employment and to start up your own business, which is both of those are really big steps. So like I'm
Mm.
really interested in the catalyst. What was it
Yeah.
that made you think, no, I'm going to do this? And
Mm.
how did you make those decisions? And if you're looking back on them, is there anything you would have done differently?
Mm. Look, so in terms of leaving the country, to go to the city, a lot of it was not through choice. I mean, look, I've always enjoyed a bit of fast pace, and so I was certainly looking for a bit more than what a small country town could offer. But reality was, particularly when I left school and went to Sydney, which was in the late 80s, the 80s, there was no choice for women. If you wanted a career, you had to pack up, go study, go to the big smoke, as we called it. And also, it, I was quite that way myself anyway. I wanted to go and experience things and learn things, and come across whatever I could. So it was good, but it was challenging, because I went down to Sydney. I was only 17, even though I was a bit young for finishing my HSC, but went down and, had to set up shop and, get an apartment and live in an apartment and study and all those sorts of things. So, it it was an easy choice, but it was almost a choice that I had to make, because the other option was certainly not going to satisfy me at all. So, and and I think that's also why I chose to go overseas. The way I am is I always like to continuously learn and push myself out of comfort zone. And certainly then that next step of going abroad and going on a one-way ticket which expired, and then just buying tickets and ending up spending 17 years over there because I was learning and meeting new challenges and new people and new cultures and everything. It was amazing experience. But I guess that is also why I moved to my own business, because I felt that I had been in my type of role as a director of human resources for a long time. And whilst I really enjoyed it and certainly think I added value to many different organisations and people within the organisations, it sort of came to the time where I just really wanted to, begin to work with the people I wanted to work with, focusing on the key aspects, which for me is around that career development, helping people achieve their goals, whether that is from a company perspective, so helping a business owner achieve their goals, or whether it's from an individual perspective, So I guess I was very much ready to do that. And believe me, after being a PAYE for 30 years, to make that change, I had all the doubts that you can imagine. Everyone's, why me? Who would employ, who's going to engage me? Am I good enough? All these things. But it was, I guess, being committed to that mindset that I'm not going to look at everyone else. I'm going to look at me, and I'm going to be me. I'm going to back myself. And, saying that, I have got some good people in my network who also have a huge belief in me as well. So that does help. So that's really it. And it's different. It's very different. But am I regretting it? Absolutely no way. It's a new learning thing completely.
Yeah. And it sounds like some of those, those country lessons about just keep your eyes on your own farm.
That's it.
Has definitely kind of flowed through into this space now where you've got your farm essentially, right? And you're responsible for your own farm. The buck stops with you.
Yeah.
But you can do what you want.
Exactly. Yeah, which is a fantastic feeling. And again, it what it does is it gives you different perspectives. Like, I've met different people in the last 12 months. I've been dealing with construction companies, which I never would have thought I would have, coming out of professional services and corporates and all the rest, and meeting some really interesting people, some really dynamic young business owners as well, and I've just, so it's opened up new doors. And for me, life is about living and learning. And so to do that, you can't sort of just get stuck in a rut. Once you feel that you're not adding value, then you're not.
Yeah.
But it's really up to you to do something about that, and not everybody else around you.
Heidi, I'm curious, are there any quotes or advice that you have, or any mantras that you kind of live by and you find yourself continuously either thinking them or saying them?
Look, I think with Tarua Pitt, who I do admire a lot, but she says that bad attitudes like a flat tire. Until you change it, you go nowhere.
I like that.
And I love that, because I think it's so true.
Yes.
And certainly through my career, and even with myself, when my attitude is bad, I don't achieve what I want to achieve, So, and that's on me. It's not on you or anyone else. It's on me. And when your attitude is bad, and I've seen it, one of the biggest derailers of people actually progressing in their career is their attitude.
Mm-hmm.
It's their own mindset or their own attitude towards something.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I really do, and I think it's so true.
So how
Yeah.
does one change one's attitude?
Ah, with a lot of effort at times. It's not easy. It's not easy, and I think um, you need help to do that. Most people need help, whether that's through self-help, i.e., reading and learning and researching and being committed. But the one thing is commitment. And being committed to make that change around your mindset. And look, I'm going to put my hand up. Sometimes I almost feel it's impossible for me to change my mindset, and it's very hard work. But I know when I do it, I have such great success and also a great sense of, pride that I've managed to be able to shift myself from one way of thinking to another. And I guess, that's something which I'll relate right back to, I guess the farming and the old school. That's something that, they weren't great at.
Yes.
All the time. So learning that, things, just because things are different doesn't mean that they're wrong.
Yes.
And being a real embracer of that, I think it's really important. But there's a lot of, and I do in my emerging ladies leadership program a whole piece around mindset.
Yes.
Because I think mindset is a challenge for everyone.
Yes.
But some
Yeah,
more
it
than
is.
others, and
Yeah.
particularly women, with their confidence and,
Yes.
sometimes I think it's just, but it is a fundamental area of change that you have to make if you want to make a change sometimes.
And I think the interesting thing about that is it's totally in your control.
Totally.
It's totally in your
Totally.
control.
Mm,
You can change your mindset. You
mm,
can change how you're thinking. It's totally
mm, mm.
within your wheelhouse. You just have
It
to want to
is.
do it and
Uh,
put the supporting mechanisms and the structures around you to be able
yeah.
to keep you on track.
Mm.
But
And I think that's the challenge, Samantha. I
mm,
think, that a lot of people want change but don't understand the effort that you need to put in to actually make change happen.
mm,
So it's,
which
and
then comes back to, do you really want that change?
exactly, exactly,
Mm,
and at the end of the day, you do, but, I think, and I'll speak for myself, because sometimes I you know, want change that I can't quite make happen
yeah,
until I
we all do.
really, really, yes, exactly. So, it's not a criticism. Everybody has it, but I think it's a key area for everyone to work on,
Yeah.
is, to be open listeners, to be real about what change looks like, and to embrace strategies and learn from others around how you can actually change mindset.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I've got one last question for you, Heidi, before I let you go, which is, if you looked up marvelous woman in the dictionary, whose face would you see?
Ah, gee whiz. You know, especially working in such a dominated male world,
Mm,
I'd say as a younger person, I haven't had a lot of huge inspiration of women, in particularly around career. But I'm going to say, um, apart from Tulia Pitt, who we talked about earlier, um, recently I had the pleasure of meeting a young lady again. So her name is Sally Hepworth. So she is an author, an Australian author. Now, I first met her when she was in her 20s in London, and she actually worked with my family to help me look after my kids as an au pair. And she was always an amazing, vibrant person. But she is now a, New York New York Times author. She's got 10
awesome.
books that
Wow.
she's written, and one of her books is very shortly being made into a TV series here in
Amazing.
Australia. And so it's amazing to see, from when I met her, and she's just au pairing in London, and to see that through her commitment, her goal to be an author, a fiction author, to have a brand, and to make that happen. She's a mother of 3 as well. Is extraordinary, and just shows me that if you have that belief and also that commitment, that you can really reach your potential and what you want to do. And Sal was is now, as I said, she's now a New York Times best-selling author. So so she's in my mind as a very inspirational, marvelous woman at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I can absolutely see that. And I was just thinking to myself, something that I would really love one day is if when I ask someone that question, they say me.
Well, isn't that interesting? Because before I went for a walk with my daughter yesterday, and I said to her, I'm having this podcast discussion with you today, and I was excited, but sometimes I struggle with that question. And she said to me, "Well, Mum, what about you?
I love
You're
that.
inspirational."
I
And I
love
went,
that.
"Oh," and she goes, "Well, you
Why
are."
don't we? Why
Yes.
don't we, offer ourselves? It's so interesting, so when I developed the Marvellous Women card deck, I had 50 names. And then someone suggested in one of the focus groups that I had, well, what about you? And I'm like,
Yes.
how the gall and that it would take to put myself on a card. But you know what? I have one, Heidi. I am in
Yay.
that deck. So and
Oh,
I listen to the suggestions and the feedback, but why don't we think of ourselves that way?
yeah, I know. It's incredible, isn't it? And I think, this goes back to that confidence when I was developing my program, and also through years of, talking with people who are leaving the company or whatever. A lot of the time, particularly for women, it's this confidence thing.
Yeah.
It just boils down to confidence in terms of, am I good enough?
Yeah.
And maybe, this is why we don't put ourselves on a card, or,
Yeah.
and to be fair, if I think about it, like I'm sure if most women think about it, I've done some extraordinary things, and, I've got through some very challenging times, and, I've moved my kids out here, and, like many people have had, women in particular, but it is a bit of a confidence thing, I think.
It is. Well, Heidi, you are a marvelous woman.
Thank you. Thank
And
you,
I want to
Samantha.
say thank you so much for sharing your stories with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I'd love to get my hands on some of your cards.
Absolutely. You can, marvellouswomencards.com.
Excellent. I'll do that. All right.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Samantha. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Heidi, for sharing your wonderful stories with us. I really love that idea of focusing on your own farm. And that's what I'm going to take on. Until next time, stay marvelous.